I have the honor of being joined with the amazing AC Chan today, who, as you saw from the title, a while back and even before it was cool during the pandemic, gave up his residence and took his family on the road. And I think that's probably a great place to open up. So, AC, I'd love to give you a chance, introduce yourself, no stranger to the HAPS community, and then kind of talk about what prompted you to make this shift.
Oh yeah, thanks Hans. I appreciate you having me on for a little chat today. Um, yeah, so I guess the short version of it is that a little bit over 4 years ago, after living in Atlanta for about 10 years, we decided to downsize out of our house into a 34-foot Airstream and just kind of take it on the road. Um, Now, oftentimes when I tell people that, there's usually a bit of pause and they look at me because they have to process it. Like, I'm sorry, you did what? Because it's not normal, I would say, to be this kind of mobile. But I guess to share a little bit of the background as to why we did that, I have to rewind a little bit further to being in Atlanta. So actually, it's kind of interesting because you and I were pretty much neighbors, right? I mean, we both lived in Gwinnett County.
Yep.
I didn't learn until later on, but I was kind of like, holy crap, Hans lives down the road from me. But Gwinnett County is really cool. I think one of the most ethnically diverse community, in the Georgia area. Even when I was there, I remember just there's so many interesting things to see and explore. And when we moved back to Atlanta from San Jose, uh, we just wanted to move into a house, and we wanted to not have to do any fixer-upper stuff. We just wanted to move in, paint, get the baby furniture in there. We were nesting. We were expecting our first child. So being in California, where there was none of our family, versus coming back to Atlanta in the southeast, pretty much within, an 8-hour radius of, most all of our family, was definitely the better option, I think, for us. And as part of that process, my brother was living in Atlanta at that time. He still is there, and actually, his daughter was only 4 months older than ours. So that was totally coincidence. But we thought, wouldn't it be cool to be back, with my brother? Kids to grow up together. We could do family type activities. Kind of this really, nice, idea, of what it would be like to go into that family scenario and be with family, as part of that process. Um, so fast forward, after our first one is born, about 4 years into it, we start looking around and trying to figure out this school thing, right? Because it definitely wasn't top of mind for us or part of that decision process when we were moving back. And as we were discovering, at least in the schools in our area, they looked okay. So we weren't particularly sure, based on what we were hearing, the research we were doing. So we started looking to see as to what might be some other possible options. We looked at things like Sudbury, which is like a democratic style school. We looked at Waldorf, which is kind of, I call it the little house on the prairie kind of model. Of course, there's charter schools, there were private schools. And then my wife came across homeschooling, and she's the researcher between the two of us. And as we kind of poked a little bit more into it, we thought, this is kind of interesting. What is this homeschooling thing? And so we thought, well, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens, and we'll just kind of go from there. If we don't like it, then there's always other options that we could try out. So we went down that path of homeschooling. Now, I will tell you, in retrospect, as far as homeschooling concerned, that there's this stereotype that people think your kids are only at home studying and that's it. They're socially isolated, they don't do anything. And I would say that's one end of the spectrum. But on
Right.
the other end of the spectrum, which is where we were out all the time doing activities, connecting with the community, really getting, I think, an education as well as a really great service orientation that I think was great for our older one. And, and the really nice thing about it too is typically the homeschooling activities happen usually between like 10 to like 2 o'clock. So we avoided school traffic, we avoided rush hour traffic. It was the path of least resistance, but it was a lot of fun too because we could go out there. They would do the lesson, and then you had the rest of the time to play. It wasn't like 30 minutes recess. Now you got to go back inside. I mean, they would have fun, they would learn, they would play, they would keep learning, and it was a mix of ages, which is great because the orientation to each other was that they could connect with each other across various age ranges. I'm talking anywhere from 5 all the way up to the teens. And I thought that was really great. I think that was more representative, I think, of real world community, that were all come from different ages, different backgrounds, different learnings, and so here we had this nice little mix of a community. And there were about 3 or 4 families that we became really close friends with during this whole process. And one of them decided about the 9th year we were there in Atlanta that they were going to sell all their stuff and move into an RV themselves and go on the road full time. Right? And at that time, we were like, I'm sorry, you're doing what? And they just thought, yeah, we just needed a change, and they had doing their research on it. So we're like, okay, that sounds interesting. And I thought, there's no way that doing anything like this, but we're gonna follow you guys. We'll keep in touch. They had family in California. They did have family, up in the Hartwell area, which is kind of the,
Right.
just up the road from 85. So they would come back and forth, and we'd see them periodically and hang out, and we would follow their shenanigans online through various social media, and it was really, really interesting. So let's fast forward, and then I'd say about 4 years ago, around around Christmas time. Well, I guess 4.5 years now. We're sitting there over Christmas time and just kind of hanging out, doing, decompressing after the crazy holiday rush and so forth. And we started talking, and before kids, life was very different. And for any of you who have kids out there, or at least maybe have nieces and nephews, you can kind of understand, like, having kids, how it will fundamentally shift a lot of things in your life, from food to watching shows and movies to travel in particular. And I would say that before we had kids, we used to do like interesting travel things. We could go to Europe. We traded like Europe for like Disney World, right? I actually joke, I think it's still true. I think the last 3 movies I've seen are actually animated,
Right.
So it's kind of this interesting shift and change. And so we were thinking about, man, we really miss travel. We used to do a lot, before. And as we talked about it, we thought, well, why don't we just do what they did, what our friends did? And we just kind of kept talking about it, about the possibility, like what it would look like, what it would take. And by the end of that evening, we looked at each other and we're like, well, I guess we're doing this, right? And that was it. We had made up our mind that we were just going to do this. So it took us 5 months to downsize out of all of our stuff, right? Sold the furniture, donated a ton of stuff, kept only a very small amount. I mean, like, I think we're familiar with those U-Haul boxes. We only ended up with about, I think, roughly, no, actually not the medium one, the small boxes, like 8 small U-Haul boxes. That was it.
Wow.
So however many years of our life of toting stuff around and things that we had, really shrank down just into 8 U-Haul boxes, which is kind of amazing. They're keepsakes, things that were memorabilia for us, or things we want to pass on to the kids. But that was it, 8 boxes. Actually, that should be a book. 8 boxes. My life in 8 boxes.
That's a good one.
But 40 years of accumulation of stuff just boiled on 8 boxes, which is kind of interesting. And during that time, it was the process of researching rigs. Do we want a Class A, like one of those big Greyhound buses? Do we want a Class C, which is kind of like one of those U-Haul trucks that are converted to live in? Do we want a travel trailer, which is pulled by a truck, but they sometimes call it a bumper pull? Those were the main options really out there, the most popular. There's a custom route you can go down, but it's very expensive if you want to do something like that. And eventually, after doing our research, we decided that we really wanted to find ourselves a used Airstream. We just found it really unique. Airstreams, well, most, like 99.5% of Airstreams don't have slides. And those are the things on the side of a trailer that slide out to give you a little bit more room and floor space. Things like your dinette and your living room and maybe a kitchen on the side. It all pushes out, so you have this extra space.
Right.
But being first timers, I really didn't want to deal with slides, because there's chance for mechanical failure. So we kind of ruled that out. So we said, okay, let's look for an Airstream. No slides. Don't want to deal with that. And, we just kind of like the Airstream, the whole concept around it. Because, Airstream was originally started up and designed by astronauts, Everything was designed to come in and out of that front door. It was all modular, which I think was fascinating. But the curvy design made it very aerodynamic. Compared to a lot of other models, like 80% of the weight is, below the midline. So it makes it very low center of gravity. Weight distribution was good. If you look at some of the old photos from like the 60s and 70s, they're actually pulled by muscle cars. So that means that the hitch weight, is very, very light. So
Right.
There's a lot of really good things about why we like this trailer. So we started looking for it, and the popular one was like 30 foot, but every time we saw one, if you weren't really to act on it like that week, go check it out and see it and maybe buy it, it just disappeared. So it
Yep.
moved so quick, and it was so surprising how much of almost a cult following that Airstreams had. New or old, there seemed to be no rhyme or reason as to what the pricing schema would be. It just really depended on what someone would sell it for, and if you really like that rig or not is pretty much what it came down to. So it's almost like the perfect supply and demand, right? There's probably a buyer out there for your rig. So because we didn't have a lot of luck trying to find the 30 foot, we decided to expand the search a little bit, and my wife came across looking at 34 foots. So 34 foots, an extra 4 feet, doesn't sound like a lot, but in terms of square footage space, it makes a really big difference. And instead of being a double axle like the 30 foot were, it's actually triple axle. So you have a bit more weight bearing on the axles, and in my opinion, I think it's been a really smooth ride. Most of the time when I'm driving down the road, I don't even know it's back there. It's just, air pushes on it, and we've been through like, 20, 25 mile gusts. Don't even notice it. I just set my cruise control on 60 miles per hour, and away we could go. So so when we found this Airstream, we actually found it down here, like in the Metro Orlando area. We came down, we visited, did the inspection and all that, and just really liked it. Now the cool thing about it on this particular Airstream, it's a 1987 Excella model. And you can see some of the blue on it. I mean, it's a kind of a limited edition design. Not that they were looking for it, but it makes it very, distinctive.
Right.
Some of the Airstreams you might see are just all silver because people, they like those. But I think this, has a little bit of character, so I like it. The truck that I'm towing it with, good question. So actually, after doing some research, I finally settled on a Chevy Silverado 2500 HD diesel. So let me see the specs on. I mean, I could tow like 22,000 pounds. And then no, actually, I can tow 14,000 pounds with this, and then the truck carry weighs like 22,000. Yeah, I got all these. I learned things in the process that I thought I would never care about or need to know. But yeah, so I was particularly happy with getting this truck because I want extra capacity. Because some trips we've had, it's been really hairy, like going up and down mountains, and having 9,000 pounds push you down the side of a mountain and at 12% grade can be a little bit scary. So having the extra oomph behind it, was a really good call, and not just getting it to just the absolute maximum capacity of performance. So so we found this down here, and the cool thing is the previous owner, he actually had his own business, and he built battery backup systems for computer rooms. He had this business for like, I don't know, I think he said like 10 years or something like that. And he would, travel, out to the country, do the job, however long it would take, like, usually months at a time, and then come back. And after a while, he thought, why am I paying all this extra cost for hotels and stuff like that, rental cars and so forth? And so that's when he actually bought his Airstream, because this was previously his. And because he actually lived in it and moved around frequency, there were a lot of things that he brought up to date in terms of, things that needed attention that we would have had to already at some point address. So when we got it, like most travel trailers typically will have like PVC lines. Well, if you can imagine, a trailer from the mid 80s having PVC, over time, because it's plastic, it gets brittle, things can break, and you're going to want to update or replace it. So he actually put in the PEX lines, which are really thick, flexible, which are great. So he replaced all of the piping, with PEX lines. He got a new AC for it. He replaced the AC, compressor coil on the fridge, put in a new heating furnace. And that's pretty much about it. He actually upgraded the electricity too. Normally, most trailers are usually 30 amp. He actually upgraded the service on this to 50 amp. So, I mean, there were so many positives, about this trailer. I was like, wow, and we could tell it was lived in, it was taken care of, and it was great. There are little things here and there that we found, but not. I'm an 80-20 guy. 80%, probably 90% super happy with what we had found and going through the inspection. So we pulled the trigger on it. Didn't have the truck yet because we just got the trailer, so we had it. We hired somebody to tow the trailer from Orlando up to Atlanta, and then we went through the process of trying to make it our own. We painted the inside. Originally in the front, was like a jackknife couch that would fold out to a bed. We took that out and built bunks for the kids. In the back, there were 2 twin beds. Um, Wife really wasn't too keen on the idea of us sleeping in 2 separate beds, So we ended up converting that back area into a queen. So we had our space back there.
Right.
Usually trailers have a dinette inside, where you can sit down and eat. But in our mind, it was kind of monofunctional. Just all you do is sit down and eat. And if you've ever seen the inside of most RVs, the counter space is at a premium. I mean, you get like, I don't know, 2 feet by 2 feet space. It's not a lot of space at all to do like cutting, cooking, whatever you needed.
Right.
And in our household, traditionally, we would usually dine on the table. So we had like Asian dining tables.
Yep.
So we were able to find a smaller one that, fit the space that was open. We took out the dinettes. We put in 2 storage cabinets, just stock from Lowe's, and put in a countertop on one side. So we kind of had like a galley style kitchen. So we increased our storage. We had more counter space. And really turned out great. We painted the inside, made it more homey. And then we just launched and off we went. So I know it's kind of really a long answer on the backstory, but I don't want to take you through the full arc of the, kind of like the thought process of what happened to take us there. I've talked to so many different families and people, and different people do it for different reasons, and they do it at different velocities as far as what they do. But there's no right or wrong to it. It's just it's a personal choice and adventure, I'd say.
Excellent. No, you covered a lot of the areas that I know people are interested in. And, Von's had some great comments that you've seen flash up on the screen. Great to see him here. And our friend Michael asks, what have you learned most about yourself during this journey? So this is really a different way of, being with your family, looking at life, seeing the country. What's kind of changed in your perspective over this time?
I would have to say that early on, what I think amazed me and what I was concerned about was really the space. Kind of going from like a 2,000 square foot house to, let's see, 34 times 8 to about 250 square foot. So roughly about a tenth of the space, right? That was a really big concern. Like we were going to be on top of each other. We might kill each other, But I think through the process, there were a few lessons learned. Number one, as people, we are incredibly resilient and adaptable. I think, because, when we started going, and just because, the first year, just every time I woke up and looked out the window and saw something different that was not my backyard, to me was just amazing. The scenery always changed. And to me, that was just, it was mesmerizing almost, So I think that was, one, resiliency. I think we were more adaptable than I had anticipated us to be, as far as giving us credit in that sense. Number two, I would say that I thought we would miss a lot of our stuff. I think it was liberating going through what I called the purge, getting rid of all that stuff. But I thought we would miss, some of the creature comforts that we had gotten used to, like things that we used in the kitchen or things, for our personal effects. And really, we didn't, so much so that I think what we've put in a rule in place that if we want to, space is always a constant battle, and so is waste. We're always very keenly aware to be aware of that. So our general rule is if something new comes in, something old has to go out. There's always a trade, right? So we just don't accumulate stuff, and that's just kind of keeping the balance as far as some people might call it minimalism. But I would just say it's just because we have to, we have to be good with managing space and with managing weight. So don't miss the stuff, so that's number two. And number three, I say it's hard to imagine, we think about being in this country, but it's huge. And the third thing that I think that I learned was we just live in an amazing country. There's so many great things here. So many cool things to see, so many adventures to be had. And I think sometimes people think, I need to go out of the US and go somewhere else to have this adventure, just to see things. But there are so many things just right here in the US that have been amazing. The contrast, the diversity, landscaping, geography, cultures, so many different things to explore here. And we've only been through half of the states, maybe about 26, 27 states. We've done 2 provinces in Canada. But even visiting those states, it wasn't exhaustive by any means. We we chose a few, select things that we really wanted to do as we were traveling, but we could easily go back and find more things to do. So there's so much richness and things to explore in this country that I don't want people to discount that. And probably where you are, anywhere within a 4 to 8 hour radius, I'm sure there's probably something cool that you could see or do for the first time that you've never done before. And I can personally say that while we lived in Atlanta, we got kind of stuck. We had our
Yep.
little things, but I mean, we never really went that far.
Yep.
One of the first parks we hit was Mammoth National Park, right up in Kentucky. From Atlanta, that's only like, I don't know, like a 6-7 hour drive, but we never went. The 10 years we lived in Atlanta, we never went. But it was one of the first things we hit, and we thought, and when we were there, we were in it, we're like, this is amazing. So I think through that process too of just realizing that there's great stuff, diamonds all over this country, literally and metaphorically, to be found, that made us more curious, wanting to learn and to explore even more than we did previously. It became, I guess, tougher trying to decide on big experience that we wanted to do because you can't do everything. I mean, we didn't treat it like it's a vacation, just trying to cram everything in. It was
Right.
more a process of being deliberate around experiences because still had other things to do. I was, at that time when we launched, I was still working and running my own company at that time. So I still had to balance that out somehow.
Yep. Well, Vaughn mentioned that you've so inspired him about the clutter-free living that while he's listening to us now, he's actually going around his house and clearing out stuff to get rid of and get rid of the, his own purge. I know I've been doing this. We've been going through a similar thing, but on a much more forgiving scale. One of the things that, as we were talking about, your life, this way of kind of moving around, one of the misconceptions I think people have is it's like the truck driver where you're constantly on the road. Every couple days, every week, you're going to a new place, a new city, and that really isn't the case. What's been kind of your strategy of how long do you spend in a place? Where do you go? Because I know you just moved you were in the Keys for a while this winter. Great place to spend the winter. You moved a little further north. So how does that work? How do you decide where to go next and when to go?
So when we first started out that first year, I would say that our velocity of travel was really fast. And when I say fast, I meant we moved like every 3 to 4 days. And I think it was
Wow.
that new energy of being on the road, and we're like, we were trying to make our way up. Actually, our first one was kind of going up the East Coast a bit, and we were on a mission to make our way up to Ottawa because we were going to go visit a friend of mine that lived there, actually on the other side of Ottawa, in the Gatineau area, on the Quebec side. And so along the way, we kind of plotted this course, where we wanted to go and a few things we want to see on the way. And actually, that year was the year of the solar eclipse. I kind of remember distinctly because just before we crossed over the border, we were at Thousand Island State Park in New York, catching the eclipse. So the velocity of it was kind of crazy, I think, and we were just moving so fast just because I think we were so excited. And then a little bit over time, we just started elongating it. We would say like a week at a time, and then kind of 2 weeks at a time. So now, on average, I would say it's anywhere between 2 weeks to maybe a month, maybe 2 months if we would like someplace. But we've really slowed the pace of travel for a couple of reasons. One, moving so quick, just it wears you out. I mean, it's work trying to plan and move around and do all these things.
Right.
So slowing it down a little bit, introduce some sanity into the logistics planning. Now, some people just kind of go with the wind. They're like, oh, we don't plan too much, and we're just going to go, and whatever we find is what we find. And you can do that too. There's no right or wrong to it. I tend to be a planner, so, I like to know where we're going to be in, 2 months. And it used to be a little bit longer, but I've gotten much better to say, okay, let's just have a 60-day window as opposed to like a 6-month window. So that in itself has been some adjustments and changes for myself that I've done. But we focused, we shifted, I would say, a couple of years ago. Instead of thinking like, what states do we want to hit, we would look across and, from things we had heard from other people and other families to think about what kind of experiences do we want? Because, in the end, it's really about the experiences and the memories that we're trying to build together as a family that, is really the underlying, driver behind why we're doing all this. And so we would think about 3 or 4 big experiences that we really want to do, and then trying to look up at the logistics, how that might work out, So for this year, I would say, so far, we hadn't been to the Keys in a while for like a long stint, and we got lucky. We got a couple of cancellations, and we were able to go down there to a few different state parks, for pretty much a whole month, which was great. And other big experience we're thinking about. So after this, we're going to start our trek over to South Padre, the South Padre Island in Texas.
Nice.
There's probably one more good month left, of warmth before it gets like crazy hot. And we've, through word of mouth and, through our traveling family community, they're talking about how awesome this county park is that's in Texas. It's right there on the island. It's right there on the beach. And we were going to go to it's called a hangout event, where some families would just kind of meet up to, hang out,
Yeah.
play and, do some activities and that sort of thing. And, but, for paying for 2 weeks being there, you pretty much pay for the whole month. So we thought, well, I guess we're going to be there for a month.
Right.
So we're going to go check that out. So, sand castles and surfing and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of really looking forward to that. Getting back to, I grew up in Daytona Beach, so I surfed a lot on the Atlantic. So I'm pretty excited see if I can still do it or not. I'll probably be doing a lot of face plants in the water, but that's okay. Other big experience this year we've been thinking about is we'd love to go up to Michigan for the summer.
Yep.
So many people talk about how beautiful it is up there and how there's so many, hikes and beautiful waterfalls and lakes and things to do up there. So I may make a run up there, to Michigan to explore that state and explore that area for a little while. And then in the fall, we had booked, actually our reservations rolled over, but we're hoping we'll catch the Albuquerque Balloon Festival in October.
Oh, cool.
So that's our big bucket list items for this year.
Fantastic. Well, I know, we both have been working pretty much remote for quite a while. I've been working almost 100% remote except for travel for 4 years now. And so I had to build out my office and finally get it updated. I put in acoustic tile. I put in studio lighting. I actually started stepping this up before COVID hit, but certainly this has made it a lot more useful. How do you, when you're homeschooling, you have a wife and kids, how do you work? Like, how do you have a Zoom call in a trailer? That seems just crazy. So how does the work aspect fit into what you're able to do?
So I would say that it kind of depends, because I would say probably about 70% of the time, I'm probably doing most of my work calls in a trailer. In the back, in our bed area, I built a small desk, to house, books and all of my office type stuff. And I actually kind of got one of those, you've probably seen this in offices, but kind of like a periscoping arm to put your laptop on. And the way I had mounted it, I can either sit on my bed or I can swing it out and stand out on the side, so I can
Nice.
some variation in positions. But a lot of the time, 70% I'm using the back. Outside of that, I may, constraints around cell signal. So usually when I get to a new spot that I may not be familiar with, I'll drive around and I'll do a lot of testing, because my primary internet is on one cell service. And then my secondary is on another one. So I kind of have a backup just in case. But soon to be, this might be interesting, but I'm kind of excited. So I had signed up for the Starlink beta like a long time ago. So I got my sign up kit like a month ago. So they're saying somewhere in Q3 I should get my kit, but I'm pretty excited about that. So when I get to pull that out and give that a run, it's going to be pretty exciting. So I'm psyched. That's, to me, in my mind, that's like a huge game changer, So,
Absolutely.
But generally speaking, I would say, like, other than being a national park, so the infrastructure is pretty good. So, since we all work online, I'm using one or the other primarily for Zoom calls. I can get Zoom video calls. They eat a lot of bandwidth. So depending on that, I don't always get to do video, but I can usually do, but I usually get to do video calls for the most part. So it's not so bad. If the other 30%, I'll probably be in my truck somewhere in some place, working out of my truck for like half a day or maybe 2/3 of the day before I come back. But most of the time, the family is usually out and about doing things. They might do a little we don't have I would say a strict curriculum, as far as things that we follow. We kind of do more of an experiential learning approach. So it's follow the curiosity. And so that tends to change, and how we feed and create the learning opportunity tends to change almost on a weekly basis. So I would say a lot of the time they're usually out doing something. They're out playing or they're hiking or meeting with other people, other families, and other campgrounds, and learning from them. So there's it's quite fluid, I would say. A good chunk of the time they're usually not in the trailer. So I'm usually left okay to work, and even when they're in, they know that I'm usually working during the week. So we just have a divider that sections off, the bedroom for the rest of the from the rest of the trailer, and they just stay up front, and I'm just in the back, and we've just gotten used to that, and everyone just knows that's how we operate.
Excellent. Well, and it's easy to forget that not only do you have, the trailer as your home, but you also have the truck that could be used as additional space. I think a lot of people who, have spent some time in Hong Kong and Asia, and or even a few visits in Europe, and I think we're spoiled with how much space we have here, how much you can just sprawl and you don't have to be efficient. Whereas in countries where space is a premium, you've got a lot of multi-use spaces. Everything has storage that's tied into it. You started off talking a little bit about some of the updates and customizations you did to get it the way you wanted to before you cut the tether. Michael was wondering, what are some of the other changes, upgrades that you've made over this period of time as your interests have changed, as you've discovered that, there's enhancements needed to make it a little more livable space?
I would say that, well, so too important to your point, we've kind of gone through the slow rotation of trying to figure out things that we wanted to keep. It's everything from silverware to dishes to bowls. We only have a set, one for each of us. We don't have lots of extra sets of anything. It's just only what we need. Keeping that pretty lean. And most things have a multi-use for it. So, sometimes we're eating out of containers that are actually storage containers too. So we're always, doing this constant evaluation, things that we use and looking what other people do to be efficient, mostly not single use. Even the silverware is kind of funny, but if you remember the spork, we actually have, a set of sporks, just for that purpose, that actually made some. But other than talking about, changing the bed and then in the front and the back and doing the kitchen piece, everything else is pretty much the same. I would say the only kind of upgrade we made is that when we first put in the bunks for the kids, they were on one side of the trailer. So they were, as soon as you walked in through the door, the beds were right there. Well, that was 4 years ago. And over time, they grow, they eat and they grow.
Right.
So, the older one, got to the point, and the younger one where she was starting to touch her head on the bottom of her bunk. The older one, her feet was starting to touch the bottom of her wall of the bunk. And we couldn't expand it out because it would, block the doorway, not very safe. So last year when we got stuck here in Florida, during, the lockdown, it was a good opportunity to do projects. And so we moved the bunk from one side to the other side of the trailer.
Oh.
Added on approximately.
And here we see part of the downside, which happens when you are mobile and having to work off of your cell. So we'll give AC a minute to come back online, which she's popping back up now. Good to go, AC. All right, we've got you back. You were just talking about moving the bunks over to the other side.
Yeah, so we moved it over. So we gained about a foot in length and then about 6 inches in width. And it may not sound like a lot, but it actually made a huge difference. I think we may have only bought ourselves maybe about a year, maybe 2 at best. But, that little bit of space there really made a big difference. And it's kind of weird, the way it's configured now, it actually feels like it's bigger and that we have more space, which is kind of weird. But that was probably the only major upgrade we've done. Otherwise, we've done some maintenance things. I mean, we've done something, for example, we put in some interesting colorful wallpaper just to give it a bit more character. When we first moved in, we painted all the cabinets white. Well, the bottom ones, as you can imagine, have gotten dirty from traffic and the kids and, feet and hands and all sort of stuff. And the white's not quite so white anymore. So we ended up painting it more like you kind of see like this darker blue in Airstream. It was total coincidence, but we kind of found that royal blue color that we painted.
Oh, nice.
The cabinets that color. And it looks awesome, and it has a kind of like this semi-gloss shell on it too, so it's easy to wipe and clean. So, through some experimentation, we found something to make it a bit more resilient, for everyday wear and tear. But always ongoing little projects here and there, things like that. Now I'm looking at. I was posting actually last couple of days. I've been adding in an inverter. I don't like playing with electricity, but
Right.
our fridge in the RV died last year,
Oh
and it
no.
was a two-way, meaning that it ran off of 120 when it was plugged into power, or it could run off the propane. Well, the compressor just died, and to replace the fridge, it was going to be something crazy like $1,400. And
Oh,
yeah, I know. I was like, I'm not sure about that. So I ended up at that time just buying, a fridge that fit in the exact same space, but I paid $300 for it. And since most of the time when we travel, we're usually connected, so not really a big deal. But in some of these longer treks that we're planning to go, we need to supply with power, otherwise, the food may not preserve.
right.
So over this last week, my project in the evening has been researching electricity and how to put in an inverter and talking to our community. And I have one in there now and testing it out. And it's been on for about 3 or 4 hours. And it seems to be working good so far. So I'm hoping that it'll hold. But I know more about electricity than I care to. But it's just things you pick up because of necessity.
Yeah, the first lesson, second lesson, and third lesson of electricity. Test to make sure it doesn't have live power, test to make
Yeah.
sure the power isn't live, and test it a third time before you touch it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely was like off, off. Okay, everything off. Is everything off? Yes, everything's off. And it kind of like, okay, is it really off? Yes, it's really off. Okay, now I can touch it. Because I've been shocked way too many times when I was trying to do some things, when we had our, we called it old house.
Yes.
Yeah, just trying to put in things like, dimmer switches and whatever. I mean, just, yeah, too many times. I just don't like playing with electricity. So,
Well, Vaughn was wondering, so you're moving around, sometimes spending a little bit more time. How has this impacted your children's relationships with others, with friends? How is, or even for you and the wife?
I would say what's really great is we're part of a community. They're actually called full-time families. So there are other families like us, who have decided to travel for a certain period of time. Some do it for, 6 months to a year, maybe 2 years. Some maybe have gone longer. But we've met so many people, through this community. And, it's just like, meeting friends, when you kind of feel this vibe, and the kids get along and, you kind of feel like, you want to invest more into the friendship. Then as people are traveling, you tend to make plans to cross paths. Some people will go through and they'll do caravans. They'll travel together and do that sort of thing. We usually just cross paths with a lot of different families. So sometimes we just need to be off by ourselves. So we just kind of go somewhere and do our own thing for a couple of weeks. But a lot of the time, we like having the connection in the community. So we'll usually be pretty deliberate about meeting other families down the road at certain places or plan activities. So that's usually part of our logistics planning. Staying in touch with family that we'd like to make sure we see again. And that just takes effort. It's just kind of like any regular friendship, just takes effort as well. So this it just folds into the process. So the kids actually have a really wide range of friends, um, everywhere across this country, which is interesting. And anytime they actually want to keep in touch with them, even more so than being physical. I mean, that's the great thing about technology. They can FaceTime or they can do Zoom calls, catch up with each other. They can text. We have some rules around it, to make sure it doesn't get out of control. But technology enables us to stay in touch that way as well too. So yeah, it's a great community, and that's the way we keep it going.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And I guess we forget that when you're moving into a certain area, it is a community. You're moving into an RV park or a state park or some area where there's similar people who are doing the same thing. So that's great that that's kind of an extended family. Emily asked, is there any family you're trying to avoid? So dodging them in your travel plans?
Generally not. I mean, there are some families that we've met. We're kind of like, oh, okay, but just like meeting people at work or meeting people in real life, you're kind of like, oh, okay, it's like I don't deliberately, I'm not deliberately looking to spend time with you, but it's like it's almost like being in a work office setting. It's like you can't avoid work because you don't want to see somebody. I mean, you're just there working, you just don't spend time with them. And most campgrounds in this country is pretty big, so even the folks that I'd say that we're not like totally want to hang out with, it's you just don't see them. So it's a big country.
Right. Tying into something that Michael asked a little bit earlier, how has your food preparation, cooking, how has that changed, being confined to a smaller space and being more mobile where, you don't have that grocery store that might be right next to you?
So I would say that we've gone, generally speaking, much better about meal planning. On a good week, we'll actually plan our meal out across the entire week. And a lot of times when we cook, we're not cooking for a single meal. We cook, so it can be like another meal. So we'll do like double portions for the most part. Things we'll store and then it can be another meal. So it just you don't have to cook all the time because it's just like at home. If you finish lunch and then you wash the dishes, an hour goes by, oh, it's time for dinner again, right? So you kind of go into the cycle. Even more so, living this life and perhaps even a little bit trickier, perhaps. I would say that the fridge space isn't huge. But what we had done earlier on is, so I told you how we took out the dinette and we put in those two cabinets. In between, originally, we thought we were going to put in an all-in-one washer and dryer. So it's just a single unit front-loading washer that dried as well. As we started taking a look more into being able to wire and all that, it just looked too complicated for us to be able to accomplish. So what we ended up doing was purchasing a chest freezer that runs off of 120 as well as DC, so it can run off the battery. And so when we're traveling, and it's a pretty good chunk of space. I mean, we store a lot of stuff in there. Mostly I'd say like frozen vegetables, frozen meats, and we just kind of stock up. So as far as fresh vegetables, I usually have to go to the store probably weekly. But as far as buying like all of the base stuff, I can go usually about 2 weeks before I really have to do a full run again. So, we've gotten into a pretty good cadence and routine of making that work in terms of meal planning. Sometimes when you don't plan meals, I just usually buy some things that are staples. It's kind of the go-to. So, for example, I know if I buy ground meat, we can make pasta with meat sauce, or we'll make hamburgers, or we'll do meatloaf. So kind of versatile that way. Or if I get we love dark meat chicken, and there's a number of different things we can do. Cooking that. So I think we've learned more recipes as a result. So that we're not just eating the same thing all the time. So I would say our versatility in terms of using our food has gotten more interesting because it can get boring, just like at home.
Right. Yep.
I will say what's interesting on the cooking side, which has been quite popular with, I would say, the RVing community, is the Instant Pot. Not sure if you've seen that, but it's basically just a pressure cooker.
Yep.
Not new technology, but we do a lot of single pot meals. You just throw it in there and let it go.
Yep.
I've cooked like a 4-pound beef roast, totally frozen, throw it in Instant Pot and have it cooked in like 90 minutes from frozen. Like, it's amazing. So you just throw everything in there and let it go. And it's like, come back and the meal is done. So that Instant Pot has been a lifesaver for a number of different reasons, but become more familiar with how to cook using pressure cooker, and just being more efficient too, instead of like having, I don't know, I'd say a single meal and then a whole bunch of sides. And it's just, how can we have more integrated meals? Use like a pan or maybe only two, not dirty a whole bunch. So try to be a little bit more efficient that way. So we'll kind of think through that process as well, not to have so many dishes on the back end.
Okay, makes sense. That's something we could all learn from and get better at. So thinking back to, or for people who might want to consider this, or thinking back to your journey, are there any things that you would have done differently, or what are the things that people should really consider before making this level of commitment?
I always advise people that if you're curious about it, to just stick your toes in it. You don't necessarily have to say, "Oh, I'm moving out of my house, going to get an RV, I'm going full time." I say test it out and kind of see what you feel about it. You could do something like like some campgrounds you can go and you can rent a cabin. Try that out for a weekend, see what you think about renting it in a cabin. Other places you go to, they actually have like RV units on site, and it's like, well, go for a weekend and stay in an RV unit and see what it's like. See how it feels to you. If you want to go on vacation, maybe for a long weekend or maybe even for a week, you can rent RVs. You can rent a Class C, or maybe even a Class A if you wanted to. Class A's are really big, so they can be a little bit scary if it's your first time. So people will do like smaller Class C's and try that. But it'll give you a flavor of what it's like to drive, to go somewhere, to to, do the setup and do the breakdown, to live in it, to sleep in it, to eat. You kind of get real hands-on experience.
Yeah.
If you can survive after a week and you still like it, then maybe you do it again. Maybe you do a 2-week vacation. I know some people. I was just met another family. They only travel 3 months out of the year. They basically do the summer, and then the other 9 months they're back home in their home base, so they keep their house. So there's really no right or wrong to it. You can do it as little or as much as possible. So I say, test it out and see what it is, and if you really like it, then you can, make the time, more and more, to kind of move towards, that lifestyle shift if you want. And in the process, it gives you an opportunity to research and kind of see what kind of rig, might be good for the adventure that you choose.
Excellent. Well, Emily brought up a point, kind of off her earlier question. If you're in an area and maybe you really don't like one of your neighbors or one of the other people in the park, or how do you deal with conflict? Have you experienced this? Have you had to move or escape or change spots because of maybe neighbors that just didn't fit the vibe you were looking for?
I mean, sometimes, there's, we don't always get along together. I mean, generally as people, and the same as kids, and I would say most of the conflicts tend to occur usually amongst the kids, something happens. But the general has been, parents have been really, I think, respectful,
Right.
understanding, that, hey, let's talk and let's kind of figure this out. It's not about blaming he did this, who did this. I think, owning up to the accountability, we generally tend to be pretty keenly aware, because not only us that are in campgrounds, but there's lots of other people are in campgrounds,
Right.
Folks who retired, folks who are just here for the weekend, and a range of other people there. So, I mean, it's not just about us, but it's also being respectful to the campground community at large. I've never actually been in a situation in the 4 years that I've been traveling where I've been at such ends or conflict with a family that I had to leave.
Okay.
The only one time that we actually left somewhere was when we were at that first year when we were traveling up the East Coast. I told you, we went through Charlotte, and we were planning to stay at this one particular campground, for 3 nights as a stay, and then kind of keep going down our trip. Well, as we were pulling to this campground and we were driving through the area, it just didn't have a really good vibe.
Right.
It felt a bit run down. There were I don't know, just lots of used car dealerships, pawn shops, just sort of those things where you kind of felt uneasy. And so we pulled in, we stayed, and we decided, you know what, this doesn't feel right. Even the small little RV park that we were in, not even a campground, just didn't feel right. So we just kind of went with our gut, and we just packed up the next day and we left. I kind of joke with folks about it, like, if you don't like your neighbors, you can just leave. But that's pretty much true, and
Right.
That's only happened once, where we felt like, you know what, we're not going to stay here. We're just going to pack it up and leave. But like I said, that's only happened once in the 4 years we've been on the road.
Yep. Well, I'll pull on, and maybe this is a great place for us to close out for the night. So Michael asks, do you miss long, hot showers? Or I guess, is there anything that you miss from the sedentary life that you wish you could incorporate to the road life?
Okay. Shower question first. So we have we have a 6-gallon water heater that will afford me a 15-minute shower. So I have 15 minutes to enjoy my shower. Now, most of the campgrounds we go to, though, are generally in really good shape, and they typically have a bathhouse. So when I want the extra long hot shower, I just go to the bathhouse. Not a big deal. And I like long hot showers, so I do that. So I haven't had to forego, that luxury. It's good. I don't get it all the time, but I can get it frequently enough where I've been happy. So that's on the shower side. Other things that I may miss from a sedentary lifestyle. I would probably say that there's a certain kind of degree and familiarity with being in a place and knowing everything that's around you.
Right.
Even though there's been some campgrounds that we frequented, we never fully know, I think, everything around us, or all, be able to take advantage fully of everything around us. Like you would being, like in a single spot. So I kind of miss knowing that sort of thing. I mean, when we get to places, we do the typical things. We have to figure out where's the gas station, where's the grocery store, where are the important things that we kind of need for our staple in our lifestyle. And then second after that comes the research as to, okay, are there any parks, are there museums, are there libraries, where can we do some hikes, what might be some other fun activities, and therein lies the research. And I know we don't always do the most exhaustive job. We usually do it good enough, but I do kind of miss that familiarity of knowing, like, if I want to do this, I can just go there down the street, but it's always an adventure. So it's, predictability is kind of nice and familiarity is nice. But for what we've traded it out for, I'd say we're still pretty happy with what we've gotten on the other side of the equation.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out from the family tonight to talk with us and share your amazing story, and always love talking with you. And like I said, wish we had more time to catch up, but the closer we are, the less time we seem to spend together. Any parting thoughts for anybody before we close out for the evening?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, just if you have curiosities, ask some questions. Always happy to connect, and answer if you have some curiosities. Things I can share, or at least point you in the direction to other people that might have better answers. But it's a huge community, beautiful country. Get out and explore it, and do your own thing, whatever that thing may be. But yeah, take advantage of it. And if there's anything I can do to help you on your journey, just let me know.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for joining the broadcast. If you are on the HAPS platform, make sure and subscribe to AC and myself to know whenever we're going live. AC has been doing some nice, fun updates from his travels around, so don't miss those. I try and broadcast every Tuesday and Thursday at around 5:15 Eastern time. So stay posted. Follow me on any of the regular platforms to see if there's other topics you might be interested in. Thanks again, AC. Everyone, please stay safe and stay healthy out there.
Thanks a lot, Hans. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.